Well, after Ukraine yesterday accepted a 30-day ceasefire deal put up by the United States, the pressure is now on Putin to do the same. Today, Donald Trump ramped up the pressure on the Russians.
There are things you could do that wouldn't be pleasant in a financial sense. I can do things financially that would be very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace. I want to see peace, and we'll see. But in a financial sense, yeah, we could do things very bad for Russia. It would be devastating for Russia, but I don't want to do that because I want to see peace.
Joining me now to discuss this and plenty more, Sky News contributor Kosha Garda and former Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee Chair Michael Danby. Welcome to you both. Michael, how is this going to play out now?
Well, two seasoned foreign policy experts, Rubio and Waltz, negotiated this with the Ukrainians. And I think that's an explanation of the fact that they came out with a sensible result. It's now in Putin's court. I'm not sure at all that Putin will agree to Trump's terms, and that will mean the Americans who've resumed intelligence and arms supplies will just have to continue to do that, and Donald Trump will have to stare down Mr Putin. The Ukrainians are being compliant. Some people say they're being extorted. I'm not sure about that, but I do worry that the Trump administration will be perplexed by Russia and not know what to do with it if Putin refuses to agree.
Well, Putin's basically said today, Kosha, that it's not going to happen. He hasn't addressed it directly, but he's made overtones that it's not going to happen. He talks about Trump, that is financial pain. What sort of financial pain could he put upon Russia?
There's a few things, but they may be limited for a couple of reasons. So one is tariffs, which is Trump's favorite measure, as we all know. However, because of the sanctions that have been put on Russia over the past couple of years, exports from Russia to the U.S. have dropped by 80%. So that actually won't hit them that much the way it would other countries that Trump is wielding this the tariff sword with. The other thing he could do is expand the sanctions a little bit, financial sanctions, where there are some exemptions right now where Russia can still receive payment for energy exports, which is the lifeblood of their economy. He could tighten that and make that more difficult. And he could maybe do things like undercut some of the deals that Russia has with energy exports, given that part of Trump's policy is expanding U.S. energy dominance, and maybe there's a way that he could increase competitive pressure over there. But those kinds of sticks are a little bit limited just because Russia has demonstrated that notwithstanding these sanctions, they've been able to actually maintain their economy more or less. There are also carrots that he could offer on the other side, such as lifting sanctions or giving some sort of commitment of demilitarizing Ukraine. Those kinds of things will be a step in the other direction and will ruffle some feathers, but you could look at something like that as well.
Indeed. Ultimately, I just hope they can put an end to this war because too many young men have died on both sides for something that essentially is just going nowhere. A little closer to home, this one's for you, Michael, as a Labor man, but what on earth was going on last night in Box Hill in Melbourne? Protesters were barred from a Labor Chinese town hall event with keynote speaker Penny Wong. Daniel Andrews was meant to be there, but he was apparently a no-show because he was sick or something. I'll note a spokesperson for Victoria Labor said this was about connecting multicultural communities, and it is unfortunate, they said, that protesters sought to disrupt the event. But the protesters, it would seem, had the view that the only way you could get into this room was to be Chinese, which would seem a little odd.
It is odd. There shouldn't be people barred from any political town hall where they have valid tickets. It's a shame the police barred people who had apparently valid tickets. Let's be honest about this, Caleb and Kosha. There is a fear of the Chinese-Australian vote that has seized the Labor Party and also concerns Peter Dutton and the new Liberal foreign spokesman. And it's very bad that via Weibo and WeChat, this influence is being used to curtail free speech in Australia, whether it's at a town hall or whether we can openly talk about the Chinese Navy circumnavigating Australia and us having not enough defence assets to properly deal with it, particularly, Caleb, if there was a submarine underneath those two ships that were on the surface.
Indeed, and it does raise questions, does it not, Kosha, about foreign interference in Australia, even if it's not overt, covert in some way?
Absolutely, and I think covert interference is just becoming more and more the norm around the world, and sometimes it bubbles up into the ether and we talk about it like this thing, and there's all sorts of a host of things happening all the time, from social media influence and bots to money that's getting put into everything else. And I think just in this multicultural, big immigration world that we live in, you're going to see that kind of thing happen more and more.
Trump was asked today about how he feels personally about the layoff of federal workers. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
Sure, I do. I feel very badly, but many of them don't work at all. Many of them never showed up to work. Many of them never showed up to work, Kelly.
How's all this being received over there, Kosha?
You know, I think in DC Central and the orbit of elites that surrounds DC Central, not very well, as you would imagine. These people, a lot of them have had a sweet deal, great job security, good pay. The wealth of the zip codes surrounding Washington, D.C. are among the richest in the whole country, yet that is a part of the country that doesn't actually produce anything or make anything, and that does not go unnoticed. However, when you look at the electorate overall, the heartland, flyover country as it's called, it's actually being received very, very well, because even if people aren't in the weeds of exactly which cuts are more legitimate or less legitimate, they know that government bloat has been going on and on. There's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse. This is being unwound, and in a world where everybody else is worried about job security and cost of living and real wages, this seems like a welcome equalization and kind of a return to a more recalibrated government that is not too big and a better size for what its scope should be.
Now, Michael, we talked about China before. Just further on China, the Trump administration is demanding that Australian researchers who collaborate with US federal agencies declare any links they have to China, as well as complying with the Trump administration's two genders policy. It seems pretty common sense to me.
Well, we had a great report written by a young Australian researcher on how Australian universities are being used to leverage Chinese research for their military. Young Mr Josky's report, and it's deeply influenced people all around the world. And not only that should we comply with it because of what the Trump administration says, we should do it in our own national security interests. And, you know, I think that's the bottom line as far as the Australian perspective on this.
Kosha, 20 seconds.
Yes, I think, you know, this whole thing about USAID and the tentacles of it that are going out into the world and causing all sorts of funding to come through is now being exposed. And if the goal is to curtail Chinese influence in the US and other allied countries, this is one measure that does it, but they should be doing it in their own right, as Michael said.